Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As the thumbnail says, today we're going to be going over all the parts you need for a Lexus IS300, the first generation auto to manual swap. I'll go over every single part I've collected over the last year and a half to do this swap, and this is everything you're ever going to need to do the actual swap on your car, so stay tuned. So as I said, I've been collecting these parts for over a year and a half, and I got lucky about 6 months ago. I saw on Facebook Marketplace here in Orlando, a guy was getting rid of his W55. It was pretty much a complete swap. I actually missed out on that actual deal, and another guy bought it, and he ended up selling it back to me, but he sold it back to me just the transmission without the drive shaft and a few other things. So I got this W55 with the bell housing, the rear mount, the shifter, the slave cylinder, the throwout bearing, the fork, and this ACT 6-puck over here, all for $1,000, which I thought was a perfectly good deal because I was seeing other guys wanting just the transmission without the bell or without the rest of this stuff for more. Once he was willing to sell it for $1,000, I ran up there and picked it up from him, and I made sure I was the first one with the cash to pick that up. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. This thing came as complete as you can get. It just needs some seals and some minor replacements of all the little parts on here, the wear parts, which I already bought, and I'll show you in a second. So if you guys are looking into the W55 and the W58 trannies, the actual transmission part, which is the center, is essentially the same on both. They're exact same housing, the exact same everything. The main thing you're going to notice is the sandwich plate. So the W58 has been around since the 80s, and prior to 1989, this plate was actually aluminum. From 89 onward, it was actually like this. It was a steel plate like the W55. So that's the biggest telltale sign right there. Generally, if you get a W55 and it's a complete one out of an IS300, it's going to have a 55 housing, and it's also going to have a 55 IS300 shifter. So these are the two things that you'll have to make sure you get, and it's most likely a 55. The 58 out of the Mark IV Supras, the NA Supras, is going to have a shorter bell housing than the 55, so that's another telltale sign right there. And the shifter back here is going to be totally different as far as what it is. They came in a tripod setup and also a setup like this, but the W55 for the IS300 is actually extended further back. So it's going to go past the actual tail right here, and that's another telltale sign that's a 55. If you get a 58 with the 58 shifter, it's going to be right about here, and it's going to miss the actual hole on your car, and it's going to go up your ashtray. So like I said, the tranny came pretty complete. I got the actual mount for the manual, and if you have an auto, the only part that you need that's a manual specific is right here in the middle, the actual mount and the cushion part. The bottom cross member is the exact same one on the auto or the manual. So mine came with the slave cylinder right here, and it came with all the boots on the bell housing, so that's two things I don't have to worry about right there. As far as this thing goes, I'll tell you guys in a second on my clutch setup what I have to modify on here to work with the clutch setup I'm going to use. So also on the transmission, you guys notice there's two sensors that come out of it. This one on this side is the reverse sensor, and we're going to be using this for our reverse lights. The one on the other side is actually the speed sensor, the transmission speed sensors that's used for the manuals. For the auto swap, you don't need this. And the last guy that had this was also an auto swap setup. He had it all tied up. Once we get into the actual swap, I'll explain to you guys how the automatic works and how the signal from the ABS actually goes to the ECU and the cluster on the automatic. So you could just get rid of this thing or just leave it. As far as the maintenance things I need to do before I use this transmission, so the boot right here is all ripped and tore up. So I actually ordered a new replacement one there. My breather right here has a cap on it. Right now the cap broke off, so I ordered a new piece there. I want to replace the whole entire thing instead of just the cap, so I actually have to press this out. So when I do that, I actually have to unbolt all these, take the cover off, and get this thing pressed out and press the new one in. But I'll go ahead and do that with my new Harbor Freight press I got. So back here, you got the output shaft. The output shaft has a seal right around it. I'm gonna go ahead and replace that. I actually ordered an aftermarket and an OEM one because they're only like $2, and I wanted to compare the two, so I'll show you guys that in a little bit, but I'm gonna have to pull that out. If you guys saw my automatic transmission one, pulling this out is not easy. It's a pain in the ass, and you're actually gonna destroy the existing one, but once you pull it out and get it out, you can tap the new one in pretty easily. In here we got the fork and the throwout bearing. The fork looks good. I looked at the ball on here, that looks good. The only thing I'm gonna be replacing is a throwout bearing. You should be replacing that every so often anyways, just because that's a wear item and it's pretty cheap. Aside from those general maintenance items on here, the tranny is pretty cleaned up and everything. I'm gonna go ahead and probably separate the bell housing just to clean it even more. I just wanna get rid of all the grease and grime on the bell. I wanna clean the actual transmission. I wanna scrub everything down and just get rid of all the oil and junk off of here while I have it out before I put it in the car. With the W55 swap, you have to make sure you have the stock manual drive shaft for the IS300 to make it work. You could also get a custom drive shaft, but in order to get a custom drive shaft, you actually have to install everything onto the car and measure the distance between your tail shaft and your differential so they can actually give you the exact drive shaft for your car. They don't sell off the shelf anymore just because I think they had an issue with just clearances and different variations. For the stock manual drive shaft, it's actually a PT64. That's what you're looking for on the rear section of it on the sticker. This one is actually worn out, but the stock number is PT64. That's what you're looking for. And then the measurements, I'll show you the measurements right now. The manual transmission is actually longer on the front half here on the drive shaft. The back half is the exact same as the auto. So it's the most important to have this front piece measured if you're buying it from someone, just to make sure that you get the right manual one. As for maintenance for the drive shaft, the carrier bearing is the wear part on here. Luckily, the guy I bought this from already replaced this recently with a new one, so it's been pressed on. But in order to do it yourself, you actually take the bolt out right here, you separate this thing and you get this thing pressed off or pulled off, and then you press the new one on. The one thing I did notice though, they put this thing on backwards as far as the direction. I don't think that affects the actual use of it. Hopefully it's in there good and straight and we don't have any wobbling issues or balance issues with this thing. As far as separating the drive shafts, the drive shaft back section actually has an A and a B. The only thing I realized after I got this is this thing is usually balanced with the actual spindle here bolted to the other side in a certain orientation. Hopefully we guess right and we get this thing back on and won't have any balance issues. Right now I'm not sure which side the A and the B go to. I'll make sure I check on the automatic one if the A or the B goes to the differential. I assume the B goes to the differential and the A goes to the front half of the shaft. As I mentioned earlier, here's all the maintenance parts I bought for the transmission, seals and everything. This is the output seal right here. This is actually OEM knock seal right here that I bought. It was like $2 or $3 here. And then I ordered a aftermarket one. This one was like $2 or $3 also, but this one came with 2 other pieces. And I just wanted to see what the differences are. They didn't have a picture of these, so I didn't know what I was getting. So I went ahead and just ordered it. This one is an actual Musashi oil seal made in Japan, and that's the part number right there for this kit. This thing's been used on Toyota's vehicles for like 30 or 40 years. This thing's used the same seal between all the manual transmissions. On some of the transmissions, the IS300 doesn't use this one, but these are like a little soft seal right here that they put inside that tail shaft. And then this is another piece inside of there before the seal for the output. On the IS300, we just used the regular outside seal right here, and there's nothing else inside. The one thing I noticed between the knock and that aftermarket one is the knock one has little ribs on the inside edge of the seal. This thing is just a regular straight edge seal. Both of these seal really well on the actual drive axle. I've already tested it out and pushed it through the drive shaft, and it just fits nice and snugly and it keeps the oil in. The next thing we have is that boot for the actual shifter, and you can see that the hole on here is really small, and the shifter on there, you actually have to stretch this thing over the shifter to get it in, but a lot of people say this thing's very flexible and it'll stretch over pretty easily with some grease. and this is the little vent tube right there that I was talking about on top of the thing. Mine's missing the cap, so I'm gonna go ahead and press that out and put this thing in. I also have the throwout bearing here, so I got the OEM throwout bearing. Here's the actual part number, and I didn't know that this thing came with that little spring already, so I actually ordered that spring separately. That thing was only like $1, so no harm, no foul there for $1. But just an FYI, if you order an OEM one, it comes with that spring already. Again, guys, on all my videos, I list all these parts, and I'll have all the parts lists and any links to Amazon or eBay or wherever I got them from down in the description. So go ahead and check that out if you need a list of these things for doing your own swap or just your own maintenance on your swap. The next thing we're going to go over is the flywheel that I have and the one I'm going to be using. So the swap I got came with a dual mass OEM flywheel. This is a Luck flywheel. It's actually an OEM Toyota one. It says Luck right here. It actually says Toyota etched over here. But this one came with it. It came with all the bolts. I didn't want to use this because of the clutch that it came with. So the clutch I got was a 6-puck ACT, but it's a sprung clutch. And this one you can't use with this guy because you're going to end up interfering with the bolts because you don't have enough room for the springs right here. So I went ahead and got a Mark IV Supra NA flywheel right here. This is just a Luck OEM replacement. It's not an OEM one, it's just the aftermarket Luck OEM replacement. I got this from Rock Auto. It was like $60 or $70. I figured that would be cheaper than getting a new disc. But I went ahead and got this thing. In order to run this, you actually have to run an 85mm push rod. So this is the same push rod that you could get from the Supra. So you need to get one of these. In order to use the thinner flywheel from the Supra, you need these shorter studs right here, the bolts for the flywheel. So you need to get some of those. You could get ARP ones also. Since I was already ordering stuff from Amayama, I went ahead and just picked up a set of these. They're a lot cheaper than the ARPs, but they're OEM and they should be good enough for me. Right here, I've got just a brand new pilot bearing that we're going to need for our setup once we convert to manual. So I got the pilot bearing right here. Over here, you'll notice I also have the bolts for the pressure plate. I just kept them on here. These are the original ones off the dual mass. I just put them over here to keep them so I don't lose them. So over here, I've got the sprung 6-puck ACT. This is the one with the extreme pressure plate. So this is a T021X. That's the extreme pressure plate. This one is the 2315 disc. So I did my research, and the sprung or unsprung setup of these for the W58 or the W55 or most of the Supras and the ISs are all the same. And the W58 and the W55 actually use the same pressure plate. The only difference is the sprung and unsprung disc. So if you look on ACC's website, they'll list this T021 for both the W55 and the W58. So along with the clutch, you're gonna need a clutch alignment tool. I just picked this up from Amazon. It was like $5 or $6. I needed it just because you're gonna need this once you get it in there, just to line up your clutch. As I mentioned earlier, you gotta replace the stock push rod on the W55 with this one on the slave cylinder, and this one's 85mm. The reason why you need to do that is you need to compensate for the difference in distance or thickness of that old dual mass. And this thing compensates for that, so that way you can actually disengage your clutch. So the next part up that we need is the clutch master cylinder. So you could go ahead and just order a stock IS300 master cylinder. It's like $120, maybe $130 OEM brand new. I chose to go a little bit cheaper route. I saw this one and I was doing a little bit of research. This is actually off a Toyota T100. I also looked at the SE300 and some of the other cars from that era, and this one was the best match just because of the length of this, the end right here that attaches, and it's a 5/8 master cylinder. The 5/8 is a very common master cylinder across all the Toyota trucks and cars. The only difference I saw on this one is the IS300 comes with studs. To use the T100 master cylinder, you need bolts, so I just went ahead and picked up some bolts. I think I got this thing for maybe $35. It included a slave cylinder, but it didn't really fit this transmission or anything I have, but I just have an extra random T100 slave cylinder. In order to use this on the IS300, you need the reservoir, so I actually ordered the reservoir right here. This thing was like $20. So between this and that and the bolts, I'm like $60 something into this, which is a pretty good deal. It's like half the price of the OEM one, but if you want to make it easy for yourself, just go ahead and get an OEM one for like $120. So in order to put the new reservoir onto here, you just tap out the little pin right here, stick it in, reuse the grommets that are already in there, and just put the pin back. It's pretty easy swap out. As far as mounting it onto the car, the IS300 doesn't even have any kind of gasket or anything. I noticed some of the other Toyotas had a gasket. This thing was like $1 for one. So I went ahead and ordered 2 of these, and I'm gonna use it as a gasket as well as a template when I'm drilling. Instead of using the OEM clutch lines and everything, I just went ahead and just bought a stainless steel line. It's going to connect straight from this master cylinder down to the slave cylinder, and I'll just end up tying it off or zip tying it to the chassis somewhere so it doesn't rub anything. So I won't have any hard lines, I'll just have a direct line right here. If you need this one, I bought this on Amazon. I'll go ahead and link it down in the description. You can also pick up the Chase Bays ones too. I think the Chase Bays ones is a little bit more expensive. So next we'll go over the pedals that you're gonna need for this. So the clutch pedal is obvious that you're gonna need that for the conversion. This is an actual OEM pedal. If you saw my video, I go over how I got this thing for less than $200 using parts from Japan. I went ahead and actually ordered some of these separately, a whole set of them. I still have a few more of these that I have for sale. If you guys are interested, just let me know. I have them less than the cost of the dealer, but a little bit more than what I paid for it, just obviously for the time and effort that I've put into it and I've been holding it. Go ahead and hit me up if you actually need a clutch pedal. I still have like, I think 3 more of these to get rid of. Also, if you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check out that video. I'll have it linked right up in the corner right here on how I assembled this thing with all these different parts. So if you look on here right now, I basically have everything assembled right here, ready to go, put in the car, and once I drill the holes. I also got the 2 clutch switches. A lot of people don't run the clutch switches, but I want to make this as OEM as possible. So this one down here is actually an aftermarket switch. This one up here is an OEM switch. I got this when I ordered the whole thing. That thing was like 20 or 30 bucks right there. The bottom switch here from the dealer is pretty expensive. I think it's like $60 or $70. I went ahead and found an aftermarket one on Rock Auto for like 10 bucks. So the harness plugs right here and the wires off of them, I ended up getting brand new OEM ones from Toyota. If you need these things, they're the same ones on all Toyotas ever since the beginning of time. So you can actually go to a junkyard, get both these switches off a manual Toyota car in the junkyard if you could find a manual Toyota car, but it'll be the same one, the same plugs and everything, just cut the wires and take it. So this right here is the brake pedal, and it's an OEM brake pedal. Right now this thing is only available in the US. I tried to order this from Amayama from Japan, but these things are basically out of production and out of stock in Japan, so you can only get it from the US dealers, and once these things dry up, they're gonna be gone forever. It's the same for the clutch pedal too. I noticed some of the parts I ordered were starting to go out of production and they didn't have them available. I actually have to order some of those clutch parts for the other ones I got from the US dealer. But for the brake pedal, we're gonna go ahead and just use this one. It uses the exact same bracket as the auto, so we're gonna unbolt the one on the car off the auto, and we're gonna bolt this thing back on. And this particular one actually still comes with the little sensor here on all the 2002 and up ISs. They have this force sensor for the actual pedal. So this one comes with a brand new one that you just plug into it once you plug it in. You can also try, and a lot of people have tried it, by just cutting and trimming the auto one and putting the manual pad on top of it. The only problem you're gonna have with that is it's not gonna be in the correct orientation, and it's gonna be centered spacing between your clutch, your brake, and your accelerator. So that's the only downside, but it'll save you about $200 for a new pedal if you do that. So the next items we're gonna go over is all the shifter things that you're gonna need inside the actual car to make it look manual. So first thing you'll see here, I actually have a transmission tunnel. I bought this off a guy on one of the Facebook forums, and I got it pretty cheap considering these things are hard to find right now, and it came with the actual rubber boot and everything, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and cut out my OEM one inside the car. For this particular setup, I'm gonna end up putting in there with probably some rev nuts and some 10mm to bolt it to the actual car, and I'll seal it up with some seam sealer to get it in there. So over here we have the stock shift knob for the manual. So I picked up a brand new OEM one right here that I'm gonna be using. I picked up the little 5-speed sticker right here also. I'm gonna put this on the actual console to match the actual manual ones. And then over here we have the shift boot, the leather shift boot inside the car. This will snap into your factory OEM silver trim on the car already. Just take this off and snap this on there. I actually bought an aftermarket eBay version of this. The only problem with that is it didn't come with this plastic ring in here, and I can't snap it into the car, so I ended up just picking up this for like $30-something OEM brand new. So continue with the manual swap parts. one of the things you're gonna need is a steering wheel. So if you saw my video from over a year ago, I got this steering wheel from a RAV4. It's the exact same style steering wheel as the IS300, and I wrapped it with this eBay leather wrap with the red stitching. I have a full DIY video on that if you guys want to check that one out, but this gives you the manual look right here. In addition, back there we have the actual cluster, the manual cluster without the auto. So I've been running this in the car for over a year now, and everything's working great on it. I don't have the auto stuff right there anymore, which I don't really need. If you haven't seen my video of me modifying that thing and adjusting the mileage to match my original cluster, go ahead and check out that video too. I have a full DIY on how to do that if you're so technically inclined. So the last two items we need for the manual swap is the manual ECU if you wanted OEM. Instead of using the ATMU and some of the other workarounds, I wanted to get the actual manual ECU. So this version right here, I believe, is a 2002 ECU with that part number. Every version of this, the 2002, 2003, 4, and 5, all have different part numbers. I think starting in 04, 05, they started actually coding the VIN numbers into the ECUs, but the 02s don't have it. So this is an 02 that I have, so I'm gonna use that one. Over here is an optional traction control computer. If your car came equipped with VSC, vehicle stability control, or whatever option that is for that traction control and stability control, you're gonna need to get this one, because I heard from other sport cross swappers that this thing is going to start tripping if it doesn't see the manual transmissions. As you know, the manual transmission doesn't come with vehicle stability control, so you're going to need this thing. This thing's rarely available on eBay for like $20 or $30, just because there's a lot of the sedans don't come with that option. If your sedan doesn't have vehicle stability control, then you don't have to worry about this. Hey guys, thanks for tuning all the way to the end of this video on me just talking about all these parts and showing you guys all the stuff you needed to do the manual swap on the IS300. If you guys found this video useful and informative, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, especially on my upcoming videos where I actually get this thing into the car. It won't be anytime soon just because I have adult priorities and other stuff to take care of, and I just can't dive into this project just yet. But at least I have all the parts now. I'm ready to go whenever I need to, and most likely it's going to be a pretty slow process. I'm probably going to end up doing the pedals and all that stuff first just to get that all set up inside the car, and the manual part and the actual mechanical part under the engine should be pretty easy because I've done this a few times on this car already. But remember guys, for all these different projects I do, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.